Well, folks, here's an old geyser in Iceland. Everyone knows you've got to have magma and volcanism to have geothermal power. Well, do you? Here's a geothermal power plant at South Bank. We need to look into that because, you know, geothermal power is a great option for baseload power. And could we build something like this in Brisbane? Because as you know, the deeper you go in this earth, the hotter it gets.
Brisbane Geothermal Power.
Let's rock.
Rocking with T-Rocks, he's the man, he'll show you what it means. From our mystic shores to outback sands. Rocks, he's your guide to our ancient land. Ancient guide to our ancient land.
So, GeoNerds, how hot is it? And why is it so hot? Well, 6,300 kilometres down. The core is at about 7,000 degrees Kelvin C, pretty much the same at that temperature. That's quite a bit hotter than the surface of the sun. Even at 400 kilometres down, where the lithosphere and the upper mantle interact, it's still over 1,000 degrees C. That's enough to melt gold and nearly enough to melt iron. So where does all this heat come from? I mean, the Earth has been spinning in a vacuum for over 4 billion years. Surely it would have cooled down by now.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Well, folks, about half of the heat in the Earth is primordial heat from when the Earth was first formed, like this. The rest of it comes from radioactive elements in the crust. This is uranium in the wall of a mine. There's a piece of autunite under UV light so you can see it. And you know what happens when you have too much uranium in one place? Well, this is Cherenkov radiation, but you know what I mean. It creates heat, and that is half of the thermal energy coming out of the planet to this day. Well, folks, the Earth leaks heat. And these are the hot spots around the Earth. And you're talking about heat flow in megawatts per square metre. And the plate boundaries are obviously where it's hottest. Here's the thickness of the Australian crust. It's up to 50 kilometres thick in places. And where it's thinner, it's a little bit warmer. And where it's thicker, it's a little bit cooler. And they've actually mapped that. So they've drilled down to about 5 kilometres, which is not that deep because Mount Isa Mines was 2 kilometres deep and men were working down there, albeit 60, 70 degrees C. And this is 300 degrees C at 5 kilometres. Here's the Queensland version of that map. And as you can see, southeast Queensland is no slouch in this matter. We've got some researchers here, and we've also had a fairly long association with geothermal power. So let's have a bit of a look at the history of that, because it is quite interesting. Well, folks, in 1898, the town of Thargomindah had the first hydroelectric geothermal power plant in Australia, which is just astounding. One of the very early ones in the world. A local blacksmith by the name of Joe Hood, who had bothered to have his photo taken. This is an artist's impression of Joe Hood. He made a water wheel, hooked it up to the artesian board, and they were able to street light the town off it. Here's the original sort of installation. They had 2 generators to start with. They were 110 volt DC generators, about 15 kilowatts of output. And since some of the gear looks original, but I don't think it is, it would have all been replaced over the years. So the town was wired up by our old mate James Traxon of Traxon Brothers fame. Now you can still go and visit this if you go to Thargomindah. There's a museum there. It doesn't operate operationally, but it's there. And this ran from 1898 to 1951, providing base load power to the people of Thargomindah.
Showtime.
Hey gringos, if you want to help T-Rox fight for justice in this lawless land, you can buy me a coffee, because T-Rox runs on coffee, and help me stare down these other hombres, because you know, coffee is the root of no evil. So Birdsville folks, population 115, plus or minus 7,000. God bless the Birdsville races. Nice airfield out there too. Elevation 46 metres, I'm higher than that here in Brisbane. The Birdsville pub, dog looking in through the window when his master's coming out there. I think everyone's heard of the Birdsville pub, there it is, 1884, not too bad. Now, Birdsville had about a third of its power generated by this geothermal plant. And it ran for about 20 years. It was decommissioned in 2017 because solar power is so much cheaper to run. That's a theme we're going to see more of. Now, this power plant was a true geothermal power plant. Unlike Thargomindah, it just used the pressure of the bore water. This one actually used the heat. It's a modified organic Rankine cycle engine. Basically, there is a working fluid, which is some sort of usually hydrocarbon, comes in contact with the hot water, vaporizes, spins a turbine, is recycled, condensed, and around it goes. And this produced, as I said, it produced about a third of the power for the town, and it was about 80 kilowatts of total capacity. But again, all these systems need to be maintained. In the end, the local power company decided solar was cheaper. Anyway, let's move on and have a look at what happened at Winton, because that's a different story. Well, folks, the Winton Geothermal Power Station. This was another organic Rankine cycle power station. They drilled a few wells down, got it all up. $4 million seems a bit cheap to me. And the long story is, it doesn't work. It's all lawyers now at 20 paces. Everybody's suing each other. They dug some pretty deep wells, 3 kilometres. Just, that's a long way down. Again, the same thing. They pump down a working fluid, they get it back up and they heat exchange it on the surface, and then they extract the energy from that and they recycle the working fluid. However, apparently almost nothing worked properly, which is a shame because it's a good idea. 310 kilowatts, it's a lot. They reckon $1 million to fix it. It's just lawyers at 50 paces now, which is a shame. But anyway, let's have a look at, there's another plant. Not in Queensland, but it's worth having a look at. Well, folks, I know this isn't Queensland, but in Aminka, South Australia, they also had a geothermal pilot plant there. This is not a big town. It wasn't for this town. It was a geothermal pilot plant that they thought they would expand out to a few megawatts. Now, this town is really remote. When you see signs like this, you know you're in a remote town. So anyway, they built this plant. And here it is. Looks fantastic. Did it work? Yes, it worked. And it was worked because it's right in the middle. You look at that diagram I showed you earlier. Inaminka is right in the middle of this red hot rock zone. So they went out there and they drill, and they got some really good geothermal energy out and they built the plant. But the problem was it just wasn't economical. It's too remote to service and to get the power from there to the customers. So let's have a look at geothermal power First of all, the different types of geothermal power, then we'll have a look at how it applies to Brisbane. So folks, unlike New Zealand and Iceland, we're not blessed with a big pile of magma under us, giving us all of these beautiful geothermal features like the geyser at South Bank. Obviously, look at the buildings. They say I've never been to South Bank. We do have some mud springs up north, but that's an artesian feature. They're not hot mud springs, they're just mud. So, this shale. This is over on the Western Freeway. This shale is 4.5 kilometres thick, the Narrowleaf Fernvale and the Brisbane Phyllites. 4.5 kilometres thick. I just noticed, by the way, when I looked at this photo, there's a lens of andesite in that. I'm going to have to go over and have a look at that pretty soon. That's amazing. I've looked at that cliff 100 times and never saw it before. So is there an opportunity for geothermal power plant like this at South Bank? Well, yes, the answer is yes, but there are some issues. Let's have a look at the technical stuff first. So we've already seen this before. This is the 5 kilometre temperature map of Queensland. And around Brisbane, do we have temperatures at 5 kilometres? Yeah, we do. Over 100 degrees C. The average lapse rate downwards is about 30 degrees C per kilometre. So yeah, we got temperature. So these are the types of geothermal systems broadly. Hot water, binary cycle, no good here. We haven't got an artesian hot spring. Hot water and steam, okay in Iceland because the rocks are hot enough to flash the steam. We can't do that here. Pressurised liquid, again, we don't have a source of pressurised liquid here. A magma-based system, no, not going to work here. But hot, dry rock, yeah, we can do that. But that particular system illustrated there is where they actually drill 2 wells and frack the rock between it. Now, can you imagine saying getting a permit to frack rocks under Brisbane? The paperwork would go on forever, but there is another way. And this would work. Well, technically it would work. Whether it works economically is another question. This is called a closed loop system. You can do 2 types. There's a U-tube or a coaxial design. The coaxial design is obviously a much easier system to install. Liquid goes down the outside, gets heated, comes back up the middle hot, and it just circulates. And that liquid, probably a hydrocarbon or some fancy-pantsy fluorocarbon, goes up, turns the turbine, gets condensed, goes back down, and round it goes. And just extracts the energy from the rock. There's no contact with the injection liquid with the rock. Well, there shouldn't be anyway. That's for sure. So around Brisbane, we could bung a few of these around. This is up in Iceland. They're drilling yet another geothermal well. All of Iceland's power is geothermal. All of it. 100%. They still charge for it though. It should be free. Anyway, we'll see. So could we see this at South Bank or in Victoria Park? Little 0.5 megawatt stations like this all over Brisbane contributing to our grid? Yeah. Well, there's a few reasons stopping it. Yeah, we could do it. Nice big one like this. Obviously, this AI has never been to Brisbane either, but yeah, what do? You can't take a picture of something that doesn't exist. Yeah, you can. It's called AI. That's a big plant. That's probably a 2 gigawatt plant. And here's the one over in South Bank with the random collection of buildings in the background. Now, let's have a look at geothermal power in the world and why this probably economically won't work in Brisbane. So folks, where are we at in the world? Well, nowhere really. The United States is the top dog, but Indonesia, the Philippines, New Zealand you'd expect. Here's the geothermal systems that were under development in Australia in 2017. Not all of them are there now. These are the geothermal systems and tenements. Now, tenements are like a lease or an exploration lease. You notice there's quite a few around Brisbane. Here's the Brisbane ones. These are the exploration leases in Brisbane for geothermal energy. They are everywhere. So, somebody's got an idea that geothermal energy might be a go. Let's have a look. These are the installed systems in 2019. You'll notice there's quite a few less than there were in the other ones because I don't think this is going anywhere. And the reason is not technical, it's economic. It can't compete with this. These big grid scale solar farms, especially in Australia with our amazing solar climate, are just so cheap to generate power. They beat coal, they annihilate nuclear, they beat gas, they beat wind, they beat even offshore wind, which is pretty cheap. They beat it. But they don't provide grid stability and they don't provide base load, whereas geothermal power does. Now, the way they fix that is they put, of course, very large batteries on these things, or they used hydro pump storage, which we do have some of in Australia, and we are building more. We need to build quite a bit more, and there's a lot of, bun fights going on about that almost everywhere. This is a 250 megawatt battery on Torrens Island in South Australia, and it's finished, it's operational. Now, these things do obviously give you some degree of base load, although 250 megawatts is not a lot of power in the Australian grid. But what they don't do is give you grid inertia, the inertial stability that a spinning generator that weighs 25, 30 tons or more gives you. So they're working on that. There's some fancy electronics they're going to get going to help us with that. But in Queensland, there's a brand new battery, I believe they've nearly finished it, at Swanbank. Here it is here. This is a gigawatt. 1,000 megawatts of power on the old Swanbank site. That's where Swanbank Power Station used to be. And of course they built it there because all the grid connections are right next door to it. So this is a lot of money, and I don't think they're doing it because they, let's have a little experiment. This is going to work and it's going to make them a lot of money. And it will provide some degree of the storage, but it still doesn't provide grid stability. That's got to come from spinning iron at the moment, but that's going to change. Now, all we've talked about at the moment is geothermal energy generating power, but there are other ways of harnessing geothermal energy that are economical, and you can do them right now at your place. Let's have a look at that. Well, folks, geothermal heat pumps or ground-sourced heat pumps. This is technology you can have in your house today. You can pick up the phone and order it. High installation costs, as you can imagine, but these things can be up to 60% more efficient than a traditional air conditioning system, and way more than that on a heating system. So there are four main types. I've never seen the open loop system. The two closed loop systems, one the pipe's in the ground, the other one you stick it in a lake or a pond if you've got one, and the big closed loop system is for offices and libraries. We'll have a look at that, but certainly it depends on the size of your building. How do they work? Well, liquid evaporates, takes up heat, moves it somewhere else and drops it off in either direction, and it's extremely efficient because it isn't generating the heat, it's just moving it. And they look like this. A bit complicated. That's quite a big one, I would think. In the basement of someone's house, probably, maybe, not sure. But certainly, as you can see, she's a bit of a plumber's nightmare. And you have to know what you're doing. Your eyes on your fries. There's some horror stories of these things when they're not installed properly. So to get rid of the heat or to pick it up, they just simply do this. Dig a hole, chuck it in the hole, and the temperature down there is constant, and the ground will take up as much heat as you want to give it. And this is not new technology. Back in 2017, this library at the UQ at Gatton is completely cooled and heated by a ground-sourced heat pump system. And you can have it today, if you got the do-re-mi, of course. Well, folks, this didn't really fit in the video. This is the Helidon Spa back in the early 1900s. Look what's in the water up there. Lithium. Good stuff. No wonder they felt so good. Here's the pool, the biggest pool in Australia. 31 million litres it was. And it was there for quite some time. Here it is in the 1960s, everyone having a good time. It had to shut down because they had a requirement to chlorinate the water. I can't think why. Don't even think about it. Anyway, they also found a nasty chemical in the water called radon, which is not so good for you in that way. Some local boys used to play there, and they used to have a swim with everyone after the show and everything. Apparently, all sorts of good gear. Nothing but good about these guys, nowadays anyway. So, we're going to see geothermal power in Brisbane anytime soon? I doubt it. It's too expensive. It's like nuclear. Great idea. No one can afford it. With solar, wind, battery, hydro, gas, and we've still got coal-fired power stations, and we can have them for a while. We just don't need it. Awesome idea, great base load. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, if you dig the vibe, like and subscribe. And until next time, keep rocking, because T-Rocks is out.
Damn it, Janet.
What? You went over my helmet?
You serious? There's the door.